So the time has come for our first installment of the Riverside Knoll Stitch Along. So in the first month, you are going to make just one pieced block. I know, yay! Which is a star inside a little shoe fly. So cute. And you're also going to make 4 of these applique blocks. So it's only 5 blocks. Some things you need to note about, when you're sewing this is to make sure that you don't overpress. Don't overpress that block. And I'm going to just flip this over so you can see the back side. So now that you're looking at the back side of this block, you can see that I pressed mine open any chance I got. So that reduces the bulk. So you can see even on my square and a square, I press those seams open to help me with that. It also really, some of these I didn't press open, but for the most part, all of those are pressed open to reduce the bulk. So each month your kits are going to come like this. You're going to have your patterns and all of the fabrics. So for the first month, you're going to get this key. The key has each fabric and then also the fabric numbers, okay? So when you're following your pattern instructions, the pattern instructions are going to say, for example, cut, from this gold and then the color number. So then you're going to want to find that color number. I'm not even sure if that's the right one. 9841404. Yeah, 9841404. And then you're going to want to find that coordinating fabric print. 9841414. So you can see that those are the same. Now, one suggestion could be to cut all these apart and then to take that little tag and to pin it to that fabric. That way, you aren't having to constantly look at your pattern, find the number, and then find the fabric. So then just cut that little piece out and attach it to that color. So as you're making every installment or every month, that's what Kim Deihl calls them, is installments, then you'll have a nice key that's already attached to your fabric pieces. So we're going to talk about some of the tips that you'll need for piecing this accurate block. So this center is a square in a square. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about this segment here, which is a flying geese block. And we're also going to show half square triangles, which is this block here, with an opening that will be, on a later step, this little tail can get tucked inside that opening for applique. And then, speaking of applique, we're going to talk about my techniques for appliquing your block. So for piecing these smaller squares, you're going to need a few things to make this better for you all around. So I've gone ahead and put on my straight stitch plate. It just has a single hole for my needle to go down in, and that's going to reduce any kind of little chewing I might get. I'm going to get these nice sharp points when I'm piecing. I'm also using a 1/4 inch presser foot. So this edge of my presser foot is a 1/4 inch from the needle. So that's important to have a 1/4 inch presser foot. My machine also has a dual feed, so I get a really great feed when I'm feeding my pieces. Next thing you need to have is a nice sharp needle. This is a 70, and I'm also using RFL thread. This thread is just a little bit thinner, and that's going to give me a better seam allowance also. So here I'm demonstrating some of our blocks. So I'm going to start with the square and a square. You are going to always have these corner squares, and they're going to be marked on the diagonal on the wrong side from corner to corner. And they're going to be lined up right sides together. I'm going to start with just this one here. And I'm going to stitch just like a thread's width on the outside of that line all the way down. So this is what I mean by a thread's width. You can see where my needle is penetrating just on that side of that marked line. So here that has been sewn, and you can see there from point to point. So when that gets pressed, then that will be a nice corner on that square. I'm not going to press this yet. I'm going to go ahead and stitch on a square to the opposite corner. And then I'll be ready. So now I have my two opposite squares sewn on, and now I'm going to trim 1/4 of an inch away on the outside of each of these. So here's my pretty little trimmed. And at this point too, if you wanted to reduce any bulk, you could just press those seams open. And now I'm ready to lay my next pieces down. Now I haven't pressed these at all yet. You have two options. If you are just starting out, you might want to wait and press at different points so that you aren't going to be stretching out all of these very small pieces. I think I'll probably go ahead and press it because I only have one hand. Whew, okay, that's better. All right, now I'm ready to place, just like I did before, 2 more, 1 in each corner. I'll get that lined up and I'll stitch that one, and then I'll stitch one down here too, and I'll have my square in a square. All right, that's sewn now, and that is also ready to trim and press. On this step, however, I will not press this open. It's just too difficult, so I'll just press that towards the triangle out here on both sides. So that's your first step for making this sweet little block, and you're going to use this method in the future too. Your next block is going to be a flying geese block. Similar in technique, it's just half the work. So you always want to make sure you're orienting your block just like the pattern shows, because the angle may vary. So you can see here I've stitched that, and my thread is just a thread width away from that line. Because when I fold this over, you know, you're going to have, it's folding over the thread. So that'll be pressed. I'm going to trim that first. You could press this open if you want as well, or just press it to one side. Just another note on pressing, kind of going back to square and a square. In these pattern instructions, which are very good, there are little arrows, and those are showing you which way to press. So if the arrow is pointing towards the triangle, that's the way the seam will go. Same thing here with these half square triangle units. You can see those arrows are going away. You can see the little piece that's trimmed from behind. So you can see here on my block, I pressed that going away as well. So her patterns are very, very good, and so you can always follow her little arrows, and please do follow those arrows in the pattern. So you can see here when you go to sew this together, when you're sewing little corners on, make sure you just press those seams going the way the directions the arrows are showing you, even here. So there's really good instructions on those arrows. We're going to next make the half square triangle. Oh wait, I got ahead of myself. We only did one corner of our flying geese. And so I'm going to go ahead and line up that other side and stitch that real quick. Okay, that one's sewn too now, and that one will be ready to press, and I'll have a flying geese block. Okay, so now back to this one, super exciting. So you're also going to sew half square triangles. These triangles become triangles because you're going to cut squares, and then you're going to cut those squares in half to make triangles. But something that's different about this is you're going to leave an opening. So when I stitch this on my machine, this lined up here. I'm having a hard time lining it up because I'm having to like look at the camera and look at this all at once. There we go. Okay, so you get that lined up. And when I get to that line, I marked a line, so this is like a 1-inch opening. Oops, I got cut off there. So now that I've gotten to that line, I'm just gonna, on my machine, sew in reverse and do just a tad of a back stitch. So you can see I ended the seam, and it doesn't have to be perfect. This will be stitched up and finished later. What's important is that you've got that nice opening and your 1/4 of an inch seam. And I'm just gonna start a little bit beyond that other line. Oh, there's my finger, sorry. Doing a little back stitch, and I'm gonna finish that seam, that 1/4 of an inch seam, all the way down there. There we go. Cut that. And you can see here that I've left my opening, and this is going to be pressed to the dark. So I will press this just going to one side. So those are all your pieced elements, and you can see here I've pressed my half square triangle block, and it has an opening, and that will be finished later on. So let's talk about applique. You're also going to be making these bias stems. The instructions tell you they're 3/8 inch bias stem and to use a bias bar, which there's another good video out there by Karen K. Buckley who makes these perfect stems tools, which we sell, and you can watch her video on how those stems are made. There's lots of methods for applique, and Kim Deihl is known for her turn to under, really beautiful hand applique. That's not how I do it, so I'm going to show you how I do raw edge applique. So you're going to need a product. This is a fusible web, and right now my favorite fusible web is the Soft Fuse Premium. So you're going to start, there's two sides to this. So one side is kind of rough. You won't probably be able to see it in the video, but it's kind of rough and it feels like kind of like it might have some glue on it. And then one side feels very much like parchment paper. So you're always going to trace onto the paper side, not the glue side. So you can see I've laid my paper down on top of the paper pattern, and it will tell you this is a small leaf, and you're going to make 4 from one color green and 4 from another. So you'll follow the instructions on how many to trace. So I have traced this with a fine point Sharpie marker. I like it. It gives me a nice clean edge. So then what I'm going to do, after I've traced everything, and when I trace multiple pieces, I'll just show you this too. When I go ahead and trace multiple pieces, I make sure I have a nice bit of space all the way around the outside edge. So you can see I have about a 1/2 inch in between these two pieces here. That's important. So now I have my 2 leaves, and I'm ready to cut these out. These are going to be 2 different colors, so I'm going to cut them out with about a 1/4 of an inch all the way around. Here's my 2 pieces that I've cut, and you can see it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just getting it done. Now I'm going to take these over to my ironing board, and these are going to be pressed to my fabric. So I'm going to just do a little sample for you. So these, all the fabrics I'm using aren't exactly what you'll use where. But this is the wrong side of the screen. You can see that's the right side. And so that glue side is always going to be down, and I'm going to press that onto that green fabric. Just a nice press. Doesn't take too long. And now that's adhered, I'm going to let that cool a little bit. I'll do this other one too. So now that this is cooled, I've gone ahead and cut it out, and it gets cut out right on the line. And that gets you your perfect little piece. And after you've cut it out, then you can peel that paper off, that's protective paper, and that reveals the glue on the back side. So then you'll position wherever you want your pieces, so you can lay them out, and then they get pressed again onto the fabric that you're appliquing. So that's now attached, and it's ready for me to show you how this is going to be sewn on. So now that I'm doing applique, I've set my machine up a little bit differently. I have my regular stitch plate for doing decorative stitching. I'm using foot number 39, which is clear and has some great markings. I still have my nice sharp needle, but I've changed my thread to a color that matches whatever I'm appliquing. Another setting that I have on my machine is I have changed to the blanket stitch on my Bernina 770. It's 1309, but I'm also going to move my needle positions. So my needle positions are over here. You can see on the screen, I'm moving them all the way over to the far right. That's as far as that goes. And what that's going to do down here is that is going to help me guide that edge of the needle on the edge of the fabric, because I just want to stitch right on the edge of my leaf. So I'm just going to, as I sew, that needle goes off the edge of the fabric, and I'm just using my freehand system to raise my presser foot and always have that needle on the far right. Sometimes I have to lift up my presser foot and adjust my fabric. And I can see this clearly through that clear presser foot. And I'm just going to work my way to the point. There are so many techniques for doing applique by machine and hand. Now I'm at the corner, and then I'm just going to rotate all the way around and keep it going. Like I was saying, so many ways to applique. Yours may be a little different. I got off a little there. See, I'm not perfect. This is really forcing me to go slow. Get a little different angle here. I'm constantly adjusting, always making sure my needle stops down in the far right swing of the fabric. And I use my freehand bar so my hands are free to guide this. When I get to this next corner, stop with the needle down in the far right swing, and then just keep going around. If your machine has like a knot feature or a knot function, you'll want to do a little knot here at the end, stitching in place, and then I'll go ahead and cut that. All right, and so there is my finished leaf, and you can either trim this or thread it in a hand needle and thread it to the back side. So taking a look at our finished block here, you are going to applique. I did the stem first, and I just started around here because this little tail is going to be hanging off. You're going to go all the way around the black, so that would be like your first step, and these are tucked underneath, so then that finishes that edge. So I did the black first, and then I came back and I did this red, so I did the maroon here, and then I did this one on top of it. So most of these pieces aren't touching, they're independent from one another. So these peach ones, though, are tucked underneath that. And then the last thing I did was the peach, just starting and stopping right there. So I really hope you enjoy making your blocks for this #1 installment for the Riverside Knoll quilt. And each month you'll get more blocks, more instructions, and I'll have tips for you to make things a little bit easier. Thanks for watching.